When the door closes behind you for the first time, the sound echoes longer than it should. You stand in a space that belongs entirely to you. Empty walls, quiet air, and a silence that feels alive. There are no footsteps, no familiar voices, no one asking where you've been or when you'll return. Just you. It's strange how the quiet can feel both freeing and frightening at once. For the first time, the world has stepped back, and life offers you a mirror instead of an audience. Most people think living alone is about solitude, but what they don't realize is that it's about discovery, the slow, uncomfortable, beautiful process of meeting yourself without distraction. It begins with stillness that almost hums in your ears, and slowly, as days pass, it becomes a dialogue between who you were when you needed others to define you, and who you're becoming now that you must define yourself. Living alone doesn't just test your independence, it reveals your foundations. It shows what remains when no one is there to fill your time or validate your choices. It exposes the chaos you've been avoiding, the emotions you've buried, the habits that whisper louder when no one's watching. But it also gifts something profound, clarity. For in that solitude, you begin to see what's real, what matters, and what was merely noise pretending to be meaning. The ancient Stoics would have understood this transition deeply. They believed that the soul is strengthened not in comfort, but in solitude. Epictetus lived most of his life as a slave, but it was in moments of isolation that he learned the power of self-control. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor surrounded by millions, wrote his greatest reflections alone in his tent, whispering to himself reminders of humility, patience, and peace. Seneca, who had seen both wealth and exile, declared that no external thing could make the wise man richer than his own thoughts. Living alone is not exile, it's a return to simplicity, to honesty, to presence. It is the art of sitting in silence and learning not to fear it. It's learning that the most important conversations in your life will be the ones you have with yourself. Welcome to Echoes of Wisdom, where we listen to the truths that rise in quiet moments. This is not a story about loneliness, it's about awakening. These are the 10 lessons life whispers to you when you start living alone. When you first begin to live alone, the world seems to stretch and shrink at the same time. The rooms feel bigger, the air lighter, yet somehow the silence grows heavier with every passing hour. You begin to notice sounds you never did before. The distant hum of traffic, the ticking of the clock, the way your own breath seems to echo back at you. The walls, once filled with laughter and conversation, now listen quietly. At first, you mistake that silence for emptiness. But slowly, you realize it's not emptiness, it's space. Space that had always been there, waiting for you to fill it with awareness instead of noise. The first nights are the hardest. The mind rebels against quiet. You find yourself reaching for your phone, opening apps you don't care about, trying to connect to something, anything, that distracts from the echo of your own thoughts. But nothing satisfies for long, because what you're really craving isn't company. It's comfort from yourself. The modern world trains us to run from stillness. Yet here, in your small apartment or quiet house, stillness finds you whether you want it or not. It sits across the room and stares until you finally stop pretending you don't see it. There is a subtle but powerful transformation that begins in that recognition. You start to see how dependent you've been on others to fill your time, on distractions to fill your mind, on validation to fill your heart. Now, alone, those things vanish. What's left is you. Not the version you show to the world, but the one that lingers in quiet moments, unfiltered, unguarded, unfinished. It's raw, but real. And as you sit with that version of yourself, something surprising happens. You begin to listen. You notice the voices that have always lived inside your mind. The critic, the dreamer, the worrier, the child. They've all been talking over each other for years, but now, with no one else around, you can finally hear them clearly. This is the beginning of self-knowledge. The Stoics called it prosoke, attention to the self. It's not self-obsession, but self-observation. Watching without judgment, noticing without escape. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about this in his Meditations. Alone in his tent, far from Rome, surrounded by war and exhaustion, he reminded himself daily to return inward. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. He understood that what we repeatedly think, we become. And when you live alone, you finally see those thoughts without the camouflage of noise. Some days, that honesty will sting. You'll realize how harshly you speak to yourself, how easily you criticize, how rarely you praise your own effort. You'll learn that the person you spend the most time with, your own mind, has not always been kind. But the beauty of living alone is that you can change that dialogue. Slowly, through awareness, you begin to soften the voice within. You start saying, "It's okay," instead of "You're failing." You say, "You're learning," instead of "You're lost." You realize that no one else is coming to rescue you. And strangely, that realization doesn't feel like despair. It feels like freedom. Because if you are the one who must save yourself, then you finally have the power to do it. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Living alone is where that mastery begins. Not mastery over others, not over circumstances, but over your reactions, your habits, your inner weather. You start noticing the small storms that rise and fade within you. Anger, boredom, fear, and you learn to ride them instead of being drowned by them. You realize that solitude doesn't create chaos. It reveals the chaos that was already there. And in seeing it, you gain the first tool of wisdom, awareness. Then comes the routine. At first, it feels like discipline is an obligation, something to force upon yourself because no one else will. You clean the dishes because no one else will. You cook because no one else will. You wake yourself up because no alarm other than your own will do it. But over time, these acts stop feeling like chores and start feeling like rituals. Each small habit, washing a plate, folding a blanket, watering a plant, becomes a meditation in presence. You learn the quiet dignity of order. Seneca wrote that the wise man is not one who controls the world, but one who controls his response to it. Living alone becomes the perfect training ground for that philosophy. Every task becomes a test of your ability to stay steady without reward or recognition. When you sweep the floor, you learn patience. When you fix a meal for one, you learn sufficiency. When you sit in the evening and the only sound is your breath, you learn peace. But solitude is not all serenity. There are evenings when loneliness sneaks in like fog, soft, invisible, but heavy. It comes when you least expect it, reminding you of every face, every voice, every warmth you've ever lost. You might feel tempted to escape again, to text someone you shouldn't, to scroll endlessly, to fill the void. Yet, if you resist that impulse, if you sit still and let the ache wash over you, something miraculous happens. The loneliness begins to dissolve, and in its place, you find stillness. That stillness is not empty, it's alive. It hums with clarity. The Stoics believe that every discomfort carries a lesson. Pain is not the enemy, it is the messenger. Loneliness, then, is not punishment, it is instruction. It teaches you that connection cannot replace self-understanding. That no matter how much love the world gives you, it will never silence the unrest within until you learn to befriend yourself. You begin to realize that solitude is not about separation, it's about refinement. It burns away what is false. It strips you down to what is essential. It's in these quiet evenings that you start to remember things you forgot mattered. The sound of rain, the warmth of tea, the miracle of simply breathing without rush. These are not luxuries. They are proofs of life. And then there's the strange joy that comes with doing small things entirely for yourself. Cooking a meal and sitting down to eat it slowly, not as an act of survival, but of gratitude. Cleaning your space until it feels calm, not for others' eyes, but for your own mind. Watching sunlight crawl across the floor in the morning and realizing you don't need to be anywhere else to feel at peace. This is what the Stoics called living in accordance with nature, not the external nature of forests and mountains, though that too is sacred, but the internal nature, the rhythm of your own being. When you live alone, you start to sense that rhythm. Some days it flows, some days it stalls, but it's always yours. You begin to measure success not by how busy you are, but by how calm you can remain amid quiet uncertainty. Living alone teaches humility through small failures. You burn the rice, forget to pay a bill, lose track of time. You realize that self-sufficiency is not a heroic state of being. It's a continuous practice of learning. There's no applause when you fix the leaking faucet, no audience when you cry in the kitchen. But that's the beauty of it. You begin to act for the sake of virtue itself, not for recognition. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." Even the smallest act, done with integrity, becomes a thread in the fabric of your character. And then one morning, without realizing when it began, you notice something has changed. The silence no longer feels like absence, it feels like home. The emptiness you once feared has become spaciousness. You no longer rush to fill every moment because you've discovered something far more valuable than constant company: contentment. The Stoics would smile at this realization, for they believe that peace is not given, it is built. Brick by brick, moment by moment, through awareness, discipline, and acceptance. Living alone becomes the forge where that peace is shaped. You learn that being alone doesn't mean being lonely, it means being whole. You begin to see life itself differently. You stop expecting perfection from others because you've seen how imperfect you are. You stop fearing loss because you've learned that you can survive it. You start to understand that happiness was never hiding in crowds or achievements. It was buried under distraction. All you had to do was sit still long enough for it to resurface. And so, as the days pass, the small apartment, once intimidating in its quiet, becomes a temple. A sacred space not of worship, but of awareness. Each morning is a ceremony of beginning again. Each night, a meditation on what it means to simply exist. You realize you don't need grand events to feel alive. Life itself, in its simplest form, is enough. Living alone doesn't make you stronger because you become hard. It makes you stronger because you become honest. Honest about your limits, your desires, your flaws, and your worth. And from that honesty grows something unshakable, a quiet kind of confidence, the kind that no praise or presence can add to or take away. That is where the journey begins. You start living not as someone running from silence, but as someone listening to it. You start existing not as a fragment seeking completion, but as a whole being rediscovering itself in the vastness of stillness. There comes a day when the strangeness of living alone softens into something quieter, almost sacred. The routines you once forced upon yourself begin to feel like rhythm rather than duty. You move through the rooms with a different awareness. Every sound, every motion seems deliberate, chosen. In the beginning, you were merely surviving solitude. Now you are beginning to inhabit it. Morning becomes your first teacher. The world outside still sleeps when you rise, and for a moment it feels as though time itself has paused to let you breathe. You boil water, slice fruit, open a window to the cool air. Each act is small, but it anchors you. The Stoics believed that virtue lived in these ordinary actions. The way a man greets the day, the way he tends his body, the way he approaches work without complaint. They taught that life's greatness hides inside the smallest consistencies. Living alone reveals this truth with undeniable clarity. Soon you begin to notice how the external world mirrors your inner one. When your thoughts are tangled, the room grows cluttered. When your heart is restless, dust gathers in corners. You learn that tidying the space often tidies the mind. Seneca once said that order outside helps order within. The sweeping of the floor becomes a metaphor for sweeping the soul. In the past, chores were distractions from life. Now they are participation in it. But solitude also tests the parts of you that prefer comfort. It exposes the subtle ways laziness hides beneath self-indulgence. There are mornings when the bed feels heavier than duty, when the will to move falters. And yet, no one is coming to push you. In those moments, you meet the real definition of discipline, doing what must be done simply because it is right. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I am rising to do the work of a human being." Living alone turns that quote from philosophy into necessity. Gradually, responsibility stops feeling like burden and begins to feel like freedom. You realize that dependence, even emotional dependence, was a subtle form of bondage. You used to rely on others to motivate you, to entertain you, to remind you of who you were. Now you start creating that motivation yourself. You become the caretaker of your own energy. It is empowering and humbling all at once. There are afternoons when loneliness still arrives, uninvited. It drifts in through the open window with the wind, soft but unmistakable. You feel its chill, and instead of running from it, you acknowledge it. You sit down with it like an old acquaintance. The Stoics would call this acceptance of what is beyond your control a more fatty love of fate. You stop judging loneliness as good or bad. You see it simply as part of the human weather. Some days it rains, some days it shines, and wisdom is learning to walk in both. As weeks turn into months, the solitude begins to reveal your true appetites. You discover what you actually crave when nobody is influencing you. What food tastes like when cooked for one. What music you choose when no one shares the room. How you dress when no one will see. You realize how much of your life had been performance. Living alone removes the audience, and without the need to please, authenticity quietly appears. It's startling, then peaceful. You start to speak less, but your words carry more weight. Without constant conversation, you become deliberate in language. You listen more closely to others when they speak, and to yourself when you think. Silence trains your attention. Seneca said that most people talk not because they have something to say, but because they cannot bear quiet. You begin to understand what he meant. Speech now feels like a tool, not a reflex. Evenings hold their own wisdom. The sun sets, shadows lengthen, and the stillness deepens into introspection. You sit by the window, watching lights bloom across distant buildings. Somewhere out there are countless people filling their rooms with noise, laughter, arguments, television, anything to avoid the feeling you are learning to embrace. You wonder how many of them, like you once did, believe that constant connection is the cure for loneliness. And you realize that the cure was never more people, it was more presence. You learn that solitude magnifies everything. Joy becomes purer, sadness sharper, gratitude deeper. When you succeed, there is no one to applaud. You learn to celebrate quietly. When you fail, there is no one to console. You learn to comfort yourself. These are not small skills. They are the foundation of emotional maturity. The Stoics would call them fortitude, the strength to remain upright when the winds of fortune shift. Sometimes, in the dim light of night, memories surface like ghosts. They visit unannounced, faces you loved, mistakes you made, words you wish you could take back. You no longer chase them away. You let them speak. You see patterns you never noticed before. How often pain followed impatience. How often misunderstanding came from pride. Reflection replaces regret. The past, once an enemy, becomes a teacher. Through repetition, solitude becomes simpler. You cook, you clean, you read, you write. The days blur into a gentle rhythm that feels almost timeless. Yet beneath that simplicity, something profound is forming, a sense of sufficiency. You start needing less, not out of denial, but out of contentment. The Stoics taught that freedom lies in needing little. When you live alone, you experience that freedom firsthand. You see how little is required for peace, a roof, a meal, a clear conscience. Eventually, gratitude begins to visit you like a quiet friend. You catch yourself thanking the smallest things, the warmth of a shower, the scent of coffee, the sunlight crawling across the wall. You realize these moments were always there. You simply never paused long enough to see them. Solitude slows you down to the speed of appreciation. And yet, humility remains the guardian of wisdom. Just when you think you've mastered the art of being alone, life throws a small chaos, a leak, an illness, an unexpected bill. You stumble, curse, fix, learn. The universe keeps reminding you, mastery is not perfection, it is persistence. The Stoics faced the same lesson. Marcus ruled an empire, yet wrote nightly of his frustrations. Epictetus taught students while limping from injury. Even Seneca, writing about peace of mind, wrestled with his own doubts. Their greatness was not immunity from struggle, it was constancy within it. So you continue. You make mistakes, you forgive yourself, you try again. Over time, you notice that solitude has changed shape. It is no longer an empty space you inhabit. It is a companion that travels with you. When you step outside into the busy world, you carry a calm that others can feel. Crowds no longer drain you. They simply move around you. You have built a quiet center, and from that center, everything else becomes bearable. You learn that peace is not found at the end of noise, but in the ability to return to silence whenever you need. That is the real gift of living alone. It teaches you how to retreat inward even in the middle of chaos. You start to see the apartment not as isolation, but as training for freedom. It is where you practiced being whole, so that you can walk into the world without losing yourself. And in the rare moments when you invite someone into your space, perhaps a friend for dinner, a loved one for conversation, you feel a subtle gratitude. Their presence no longer fills a void. It enriches something already complete. You listen without needing to speak, share without needing to impress, because now you understand what few ever learn. Until you are at peace alone, you can never truly be at peace together. The night ends, the lights dim, and you lie in bed, not with loneliness but with quiet certainty. You realize that this is what the Stoics meant by harmony with nature, to flow with the rhythm of life, accepting both companionship and solitude as seasons of the same sky. Outside, the city continues its restless pulse, but inside, you rest easily. You have stopped fighting the quiet. You have started living within it. There comes a day when solitude no longer feels like a lesson, but like a language you now speak fluently. You move through your space as though it were an extension of your body, familiar and gentle. The silence that once weighed heavy now breathes with you, steady and kind. The days flow without resistance. You wake, you live, you rest, and each movement carries an awareness that was once impossible. You begin to notice that your mind no longer demands constant occupation. Where once you reached for distraction at every pause, now you find comfort in stillness. It feels as if your thoughts, once wild horses, have learned to graze peacefully. The constant need to be somewhere else has faded. You no longer chase moments, you inhabit them. That, the Stoics would say, is the essence of wisdom, presence without attachment. There is a certain freedom that blooms quietly inside you, not loud or dramatic, but real. You find yourself content even in imperfection. The dishes may stay unwashed for a day, the plans may change, the future may remain uncertain, and yet peace stays. You begin to understand what Epictetus meant when he said, "Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control, and some are not." You stop fighting what you cannot control. You stop demanding that life obey your will. Living alone teaches this lesson in 1,000 small ways. The power may go out in the middle of dinner. The rain may fall just when you needed to leave. The plant you watered so carefully might still wither. At first, these things frustrate you, but over time, you learn to smile at them. You shrug, you adapt, you move on. In that small shrug lies the seed of serenity. The Stoics called it apatheia, not apathy, but composure in the face of the uncontrollable. You start to sense the rhythm of existence more intimately. Morning and night are no longer just times of day. They become metaphors for the cycles within you: awakening, doing, releasing, resting. You realize that solitude mirrors life itself. Everything comes and goes. Emotions rise and fade. People appear and leave. The body strengthens, then weakens. Nothing holds still, and somehow, that's beautiful. Sometimes, on quiet afternoons, you feel a kind of gratitude so vast it brings tears without sadness. Gratitude for being alive, for having time, for having awareness enough to see how fleeting everything is. You recall Marcus Aurelius's words, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." You've read it before, but now you feel it. The words have turned from philosophy into experience. There are moments of deeper reflection too, moments when you realize that solitude has made you more compassionate, not less. Having seen your own vulnerabilities up close, you no longer judge others for theirs. When you watch people rushing, shouting, struggling, you recognize the same fear you once carried, the fear of being alone with oneself. You no longer condemn, you quietly understand. This is another gift of solitude, empathy born from self-knowledge. One evening, you sit by the window as rain begins to fall. The sound against the glass feels like conversation. You remember how at the beginning of this journey, silence felt like emptiness. Now it feels full of life, full of subtle meaning. You see how nothing external has changed, only you have. The same walls, the same street, the same rain, but a different soul observing it. Seneca wrote that the wise man lives as if each day were his whole life. You begin to grasp this. Each small day alone feels complete in itself. You stop waiting for some grand event to justify your existence. The meaning you once sought in others' eyes, in the future, in success, you now find in washing a cup, in watching clouds drift, in breathing deeply. The ordinary has become extraordinary simply because you've learned to see it. The world outside continues its restless motion. You still meet people, work, socialize, travel, but something fundamental has changed. You no longer lose yourself in others. The boundaries of your peace remain firm yet flexible. You give more freely because you no longer give from emptiness. You listen more patiently because you no longer fear silence. You love more purely because you no longer love out of need. This is what it means to live alone and yet not be lonely, to be whole in yourself, so that connection becomes a choice, not a dependency. Solitude, once an exile, has turned into a sanctuary. It is where you return to recharge, to reflect, to remember who you are before the world tells you who to be. Every philosopher, every mystic, every thinker who has ever touched truth has walked through this same silence. The Buddha beneath the tree, Marcus Aurelius in his tent, Thoreau by the lake, Rumi in the desert. They all discovered that truth does not shout, it whispers. And to hear it, one must first become still. You begin to see how every challenge of solitude was preparing you for this state. The fear that once haunted you has softened into courage. The boredom that once weighed you down has turned into patience. The longing that once burned has become appreciation. What you resisted was your own evolution. Living alone did not change who you are. It revealed who you were beneath the noise. There's an evening when, without realizing it, you light a candle just to watch its flame. The light dances, the wax melts, and you see the story of life within it. Brightness, consumption, disappearance. You understand that everything beautiful is temporary, and that's why it's beautiful. You smile, not with sadness, but with acceptance. This acceptance is not resignation, it's harmony. The Stoics called it living according to nature, which means aligning your will with the order of the universe. You finally grasp that nothing belongs to you, not even your own body, and yet everything is given to you in trust, moment by moment. The air you breathe, the thoughts you think, the people you meet, they are all gifts on loan. Gratitude becomes your natural state. You begin to realize that you were never truly alone. Life itself has been accompanying you the entire time, in the rustle of leaves, in the rhythm of your heartbeat, in the quiet intelligence that guides the tides and stars. Solitude simply tuned your senses to hear it. You have not been abandoned by the world. You have been reintroduced to it. One day, you step outside and notice how the sky seems larger, the air clearer, the faces of strangers softer. It's not the world that has changed, it's your gaze. Living alone has taught you how to see without wanting, to appreciate without owning, to love without clinging. You carry your home within you now. Wherever you go, peace follows. At night, when you return to your space and close the door behind you, the silence greets you like an old friend. You light a small lamp, prepare a simple meal, and sit. There is no performance, no pretense, no hurry. You are not waiting for life to begin anymore. You are living it. This is the final lesson of solitude. That peace is not found by escaping others, but by reconciling with yourself. It is not about walls or distance. It is about presence. Once you have learned to live with yourself kindly, the whole world becomes a companion. Marcus Aurelius once asked himself, "What is the good man's soul like?" It is like a round, perfect pearl, self-contained, smooth, and unshaken. After all this time, you finally understand what he meant. Living alone has polished you into that pearl, not flawless, but whole. And so, when you turn off the lights and lie in the darkness, there is no fear left. Only gratitude. Gratitude for the silence that once frightened you, for the solitude that shaped you, and for the life that continues quietly around you. The room breathes, and so do you. You close your eyes knowing that everything you need is already here, within. In the end, solitude was never a punishment. It was a teacher. It took from you the noise, the comfort, the illusion of certainty, and gave you truth in return. It taught you to hold your own hand, to face your own fears, to build your own peace brick by brick. It stripped away everything you thought you needed, until only what was real remained. And in that stillness, you found yourself. Living alone is not about shutting the world out. It's about learning how to meet it whole. It's the quiet practice of self-reliance, the slow awakening to presence, the art of listening to life without demanding it be louder. What began as isolation has turned into intimacy, not with others, but with existence itself. You now understand what the Stoics meant when they said that the universe is within you. Every calm breath, every gentle thought, every act of patience becomes an echo of the greater order around you. Solitude revealed that you were never separate from life. You were part of it all along. You are not the observer of the world. You are its expression. So when the next chapter begins, when the door opens and company returns and life grows busy again, remember what this quiet season taught you. Remember to carry stillness with you into the noise, to keep simplicity in the midst of excess, to protect the small flame of peace you built within. Let it guide you when confusion rises. Let it remind you of what matters when the world tries to make you forget. Because the greatest lesson of living alone is that you are already home. You were searching for belonging, and all along, belonging was the state of being present in your own skin. You have learned to sit with yourself without fear, and that means you can sit anywhere, in crowds, in chaos, in uncertainty, and still be free. So tonight, as you close your eyes, thank the silence that shaped you. Thank the solitude that strengthened you. Thank the life that continues to unfold quietly around you, asking for nothing but your attention. And ask yourself, softly, what will I do with this peace I've found? Will I guard it only for myself, or will I carry it into the world, to live, to love, to listen a little more wisely? If these reflections have spoken to your soul, share them with someone who's learning to walk their own quiet path. Subscribe to Echoes of Wisdom, where ancient philosophy meets the modern heart. And together, let us keep listening to the truths that whisper beneath the noise, learning, again and again, how to live with grace, with depth, and with peace.